I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
Great. Hello. Wonderful as usual, Lisa. So yeah, I'm Jim Shelton. Almost everybody knows me, but this is my shtick. I'm a retired epidemiologist and I show slides. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and show the slides, hopefully. People see that? Yes, and hear me? Good. Okay. So, right. So the first thing we're going to do is have a special message from Colorado.
Hello, 31st Street. This is Congresswoman Yadira Carabeo from Colorado's 8th District. I wanted to give a huge thank you for supporting me and truly believing in our race. When it was all said and done, we were victorious by just 1,600 votes, less than 1%. My race literally came down to every phone call made, every dollar raised, and every door knocked. You helped me raise over $65,000 last cycle, a true difference maker in a race where Republicans were spending millions in dark money throughout the district. You helped us speak directly to the voters of Colorado's 8th District, and I can't thank you enough. I hope to be able to join you on one of your meetings soon, and thank you virtually for all the work that you did on my behalf.
Okay, so savor that for a couple of seconds because we have another look back. Oops. Michael, who's leads our Pennsylvania team, is going to lead us through a couple of slides related to one of our grassroots groups that we supported last year. Michael, I saw you're on, so over to you.
Thank you. Well, just as has been talked about, we like to not just evaluate what we're going to support ahead of time, but afterwards come back and look and evaluate how well did we do in supporting this group. And so I want to briefly talk about our review of one of the two grassroots groups in Pennsylvania we supported in 2022. And this is Make the Road Pennsylvania, which is a group that focuses on Latinos in 5 counties in eastern Pennsylvania. There's another group we also supported, and we'll report on that at a later time. So Make the Road Pennsylvania works with these 5 counties. Go back to the, thank you. And these 5 counties have about 500,000 Latino residents, which is half the Latino residents in the state of Pennsylvania. And so not only is it sort of a very rich area demographically, it is also the overlaps with the jurisdictions of 2 Congress people in Pennsylvania who were very much at risk in 2022. So they were, Make the Road was working on this in this important part of Pennsylvania. So you can do the next slide. When we talked to Diana Robinson, the civic engagement director, she told us that their goal for Make the Road Pennsylvania was to register about 6,400 new voters in these 5 counties and knock on 56,000 doors. And when we got in touch with her after the election, she reported that they had exceeded their goal for voters registered by a couple hundred. And if you've ever tried to register new voters, this is quite impressive. This is really hard to do. And with regard to the doors they knocked, they far, far exceeded what their goal was. And to put that number 310,000 doors knocked in perspective, the entire Pennsylvania Democratic Coordinated Campaign for all of Pennsylvania knocked on about 880,000 doors. And they also made a slew of phone calls, texts, and put out bilingual radio and digital ads. And I would also say, with respect to those 2 congressional candidates that we were concerned about, who were considered in toss-up races or sometimes lean Republican races. They both won. And one of them won by under 2%. So we feel that our efforts to help make the road Pennsylvania really played a meaningful role in winning those 2 seats and contributing to the statewide races for Governor Shapiro and Senator Fetterman.
Great. So thanks, Michael. And I'm going to dwell on this just a second, a little more. Just to say that this group is really dynamite. I mean, it says Philadelphia, but their bailiwick is actually not all that huge. And, they're like the little engine that could or something. I'm sorry for not a better metaphor. But the other thing about is not just that they were so good in this election, but the value of these kinds of groups is they're there. They stay there. They're going to help us, as well. So this kind of thing we really want to invest in. All right. So welcome back. And in terms of what else we're going to talk about, the main thing we want to talk about is Wisconsin, of course, but we haven't, been in touch with you in terms of a monthly meeting for some time. So we really want to give some sense of our strategic thinking for this year and even next year. And we really can't do justice to it given the amount of time that we have, but I'm going to try to give you some of that before we turn over to talk about Wisconsin. Now, in the meantime, sorry, this is kind of like the Pledge of Allegiance or something. Just, we have our, our principles that we operate, and I really do operate on these things that we do. But I put the first one in red here because, what I really want to talk about is our strategic opportunities. But looking back a little bit more, this was our funding for all of last year, except for the Virginia special election, which was sort of went in the next year. And there are 2 different accountings here. One is by sort of category of where it went, and the other is by state, adding up to the same thing. And the only point I want to make really is that the real lion's share of what we provided was in what you could call infrastructure, grassroots groups and state parties. And we have this sort of tension in a way about funding elections versus funding other kind of things. And sometimes you can do both. But I'm really proud of us because, it's a lot easier to raise money for elections, in my opinion. And the fact that you folks, weighed in to support these other kind of things, which I think had a lot of impact, is really to your credit. So thank you for that. Just a little bit on our scorecard. There's more of this on the website, but these are the House races that we supported. Almost all of them new candidates, including Yadira Caraveo at the top. And, we lost a couple of them, one pretty badly, the other one pretty close. But I think that was, I'm happy about that, as you should be. Then we sort of have an overall scorecard here. We like to, think that we're not going to win all the races, that, if we win all the races, we'd like to, but we're doing something wrong if we do win them all because they're too likely to win. But in fact, this time around, when you do with the House races, the legislature races, and we're going to throw in the Georgia special Senate race, it comes out to about 67%. So that's, right in the money that we want to be, a little higher. Again, thanks for your help with all of that. All right, now looking forward, we've kind of focused in and shifted a little bit for looking forward for this year and next, and kind of have a tiered kind of designation here. The number of reasons why we select the states, some of it's, impact, some of it's strategic in other ways, and some of it's just because we know the states and they're nearby. And so Virginia's back in play because of their legislature. Pennsylvania is always a priority. We've added Wisconsin. So not only are we going to weigh in, I think, for the Supreme Court race, but I think because it's so important, as you will see, for the presidential race, that we're going to try to keep some support there on something of an ongoing basis, as well as North Carolina and Georgia. And always keeping an eye on that other major swing seat, Arizona. So yeah, here's the kind of the conundrum. Is it elections, or is it sort of more long-term kind of things that will ultimately impact on elections? And so for 2023, here are the election priorities. No surprises, I suppose, at least for the first two, the Wisconsin Supreme Court and all of the Virginia legislature. So, you know, we have to do something about Youngkin's position there. There are races in Pennsylvania, local races in the Supreme Court, but turns out those local races are actually important too because of the influence on the election process. And we'll look at special elections and really look at anything anywhere that looks like it needs help strategically. But the thing is, compared to that, 2024 is just huge. You know, just the presidency and all these other races. You know, if we don't win the presidency, we are really up the creek, if you will. I do think we have a chance to win back the House. I think we have a chance to defend the Senate and keep the majority there, though it will be difficult, and so forth. So, you know, a lot of our strategic thinking has to be about 2024, in my opinion. And the problem with the elections is, you know, they're exciting and whatever, but they're over and done with, and you know, then, you know, there's not that much sustained effort. I like to use this metaphor of this roller coaster. So, all right, infrastructure priorities. Okay, Jim, you're telling me we should be doing, you know, these longer term infrastructure things. So I've got grassroots groups here and I've got state parties, but I've added something. The anti-right wing propaganda. And I'm going to go into a little bit into that, but just to kind of get it on board. But really, just overall, to sort of, I guess I'm driving the point a lot here. This really should be primarily, not primarily, but you know, for the most part, the infrastructure building. And I know that's more abstract. I know it's maybe not quite as exciting and so forth. But I think in the longer term, it's going to pay off a lot better for us. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the right-wing media. And I will confess that I knew it was a problem, but I didn't know how much of a problem it was until leadership from Julie Greenberg and some other conversations have really opened my eyes. So in addition to Fox News and Newsmax, I guess, and so forth, you've got local TV with Sinclair Broadcasting, you've got radio, a lot of the same people, almost for the most part, 100%, you know, these working class people listen to that stuff all day long. But then there's also these other three, you know, internet more based kinds of things. So on YouTube, PragerU, I had never heard of. It steers people on YouTube to look at other things, that it steers them toward right-wing propaganda. And then you've got social media of, you know, going into Facebook organizations and, you know, digital media like Breitbart and so forth. These things actually have a big stranglehold on the electorate, unfortunately. So, but there is hope. And I think part of it is that people are waking up to this. But it's not just a matter of waking up to it, but there are opportunities. And again, with Julie's leadership, we're looking out to see where there might be some good opportunities, and there are good opportunities. One of the ways to think about this is kind of there are three different tiers, if you will, of intervention. And we're still, I think the nomenclature is still kind of in flux a bit, but some of it is sort of more structural kinds of trying to change the playing field in a way, like trying to reform Section 230, I guess, of the FTC. Is that what it is? Anyway, but also there's an arena, I'll go down to the bottom. There's an arena where a lot of people are sort of monitoring what's going on in the internet and then trying to mobilize the forces of good to sort of reach out kind of in a decentralized way, individually and so forth. But here's the arena where we think there's the most opportunity, and something called Courier Newsroom, which I think may be the very best opportunity that we have. But there are also efforts like civic media in Wisconsin that Lou Friedland was actually involved in helping to do. It actually bought a private business guy bought 14 radio stations, and it operates as a business, and it operates as a even-handed, maybe a little bit left-leaning sort of radio stations. And then there are a lot of efforts to support local news too. One of the things that's about attractive about this arena is that there are a fair number of tax-deductible C3 kinds of activities that you can, that are good opportunities that I think we'll be exploring as well. So anyway, more to come on that. Here's a recommendation and a request. This book, Battling the Big Lie, was part of my epiphany, I would say, by Dan Pfeiffer. Almost everybody probably knows who he is. I would recommend this book to everybody that's listening to this, to me right now. It's really great in understanding the problem. I think it only goes so far in the issue of the ways to address it, but at least in understanding it. And it's an easy read, by the way. So he's a good writer. So I recommend it to all of you. And we are planning to have a seminar in late April that will have the head of Courier Newsroom and Dan Pfeiffer present. We won't be asking you for money for a change. We're just going to be having a seminar, and just to help people understand what the situation is and what we can do about it. Anyway, I think strategically, we got to start doing this, and a lot of people, other people are starting to. So that's one of the good aspects of it. All right, now we do have Wisconsin to talk about, of course. And these are our two organizations that we're raising money from, hopefully today as well as Tuesday. And here she is, Judge Janet Prostasiewicz. And but I can tell you, she's a great candidate. She's come out swinging in a nice way, and especially for a judge. Maybe our special guest, Jasmine Neers, will tell us more about that. Now, I don't have time to go into a lot of what's going on. I think almost everybody on this Zoom knows a fair amount about Wisconsin and what's going on in the Supreme Court race, but I will just, of course, Jasmine is going to give us a lot more information than this, but just on the issue of the US House of Representatives, the gerrymandering issue has been just one of many big problems with this current Supreme Court. And even though Tony Evers got 51% of the vote in 2022, there's only 2 Democrats out of that 8 in Wisconsin. So, you know, hopefully if there's some redistricting for the legislature and also the US House that can occur, you know, that we only need, what, 5 or 6 seats to turn over to win. Okay, and now why am I showing you this picture of this person? I think you all know who she is. Well, this is to kind of put the fear in us. This is what we don't want. We want to get rid, we want to vote her away by having a better Congress. Okay, now some of you may know, it looks like Judge Janet did really well in the primary, which is true. But one of the things that Jasmine is going to make, one of the points she's going to make, and I want to make it also, is it's a whole new ball game in this primary election. And here's why. First of all, Wisconsin is always very close. The thing is, there was a dogfight going on before, and now the opposition is united against with their candidate Kelly. The opposition the dark money and all that, they're going to throw a mountain of money against us. So we're going to have to do a really good job to counteract that. And also the turnout is likely to be about 50% higher than there was in the primary. So it's really in flux because of that. But the good news is that we're unified, and I'm happy to say this campaign is really on the offensive, everything that I've seen, which I really like. Okay, now here's the thing, that Wisconsin is about the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will affect 2024. But also Wisconsin's 10 electoral votes are right on the tipping point for the presidential election. So this is an interesting figure that I borrowed from somebody. And basically it starts on the left side with DC, which has the greatest majority for Democrats, and on the right side, Wyoming, and it works its way to the middle. And, you know, it gets lighter and lighter in terms of what the vote margin was. And we did win Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin. But I don't think we can count on Georgia. And I don't know if we can count on Arizona. I hope we'll win it. So we really need to focus on Wisconsin for that presidential election. As much as any other state, I would say Wisconsin is arguably the most important state, although there are a number of important states as well. So let's move back to our groups that we selected. And, you know, okay, Jim, now why did you select these folks? Well, we spent a lot of time looking for these folks. A large part of it is because the major effort is going to be what I call urban-ish areas, and that's fine. And, you know, Dane County, Milwaukee County, so forth, those turnouts are going to be really important, but it's going to be close. And, you know, we think that there's a significant number of votes in these, I guess it's 12 counties that these groups work in. We think the groups have good capabilities. We thought they were, you know, very capable. And here's, of course, the other thing. Think back to that group in Pennsylvania. These folks are going to have a long-term presence, and the model is sort of part paid and part volunteers. The paid people support the volunteers, so they have this long-term presence. And they know where they are. You know, they're not coming in from the outside, and so that's a great comparative advantage. We think additional funding will be put to good use. And again, of course, we're building this capacity for 2024 and beyond. So we are going to be having the fundraiser on Tuesday. And in addition to that, we really appreciate any additional support you can do today. The sooner the money comes in, the more effective it's going to be. Here are our two leaders of the two grassroots groups. And thank you very much. I think now it's time to turn it over to Jasmine Neers, America Votes Wisconsin State Director. I've been on a couple of calls with her, and I can tell you she's, first of all, very astute, and she knows Wisconsin like the back of her hand. So I'll just turn it over to her now.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you for having me on here. I'm really excited to talk about my state, Wisconsin. Brought a couple slides for everyone. And also just want to start off by just saying thank you. Thank you for everything that all of you do for Wisconsin and also for the rest of the country. I really love to see like how grassroots groups like 31st Street, Swing Left come together and really make huge differences, especially as Jim was talking about when it comes to that infrastructure and the ability to make sure that we are building power throughout the year, not just on election cycles. Here at America Votes, we are the coordination hub for the progressive movement. We have about 400 groups that we coordinate on a national or state level, and in Wisconsin, there's about 63 groups, so a big kind of coalition that we work with during election cycles. And we do truly believe that elections are a tool in the toolbox to how we win long term and actually build sustainable power throughout this state as well as throughout the country. So our main focus is on voter mobilization, it's on voting rights, and it's on really coordination. So getting everyone together and saying where people are, where are the resources being spent, where is the competitive advantage of each group, and then how can we all make sure that we're going where we need to go and there's less duplication and resources are spread as efficiently as possible. So that's like kind of why we exist and why our partners come to us at the table. So let's talk about this Supreme Court election that we have. It's just 37 days until the general election. So just 37. That stays constant in my mind. And this Supreme Court really is like the Supreme Court, as Jim said, that could essentially make all the difference for Wisconsin. I'll get into some of the reasons why, but just for context, of the last 3 Supreme Court races that we have run in Wisconsin, we won 2 and we lost 1. And the one that we lost by 5,600 votes in 2019. And that roughly like measures down to 3 votes per municipality in Wisconsin. So what we say is that in Wisconsin, every single vote matters because you can either win or lose on the margins. And so the work that happens in the urbanish areas, as well as the work that happens in the rural areas, are extremely important. And while we may not win a complete county in some of our rural areas, what we employ is something called losing forward. It's building up those votes that we know are there for progressives and for swing voters in areas outside of our major kind of blue centers to ensure that we are moving the bucket forward and getting those marginal votes every single time so we can build up to that win. So why do we care so much about the 2023 Supreme Court election? One, it's something that we've been talking about for at least a decade. We all knew it was coming and we've been building toward it. And we've been saying since 2020 that our election cycle begins and ends in April of 2023. So the first thing is that, as Jim said, Wisconsin really is that tipping point state. In the presidency runs through Wisconsin, and the Supreme Court has a huge role in deciding if the electoral votes that we gain in the election results actually go to the president that won the election. And they actually, the kind of contested 2020 election actually went to the Supreme Court, and there was one swing vote that decided that Wisconsin would deliver those 10 electoral votes to President Biden. So we can imagine another scenario like that coming up again in 2024. Also, it's about reversing Walker's legacy. For the past decade, when he was in office, Walker essentially destroyed everything that was really progressive about Wisconsin. And so we had to fight our way back. We currently do not have abortion in Wisconsin. And that means no exceptions. That's not for rape, incest, or even the health of the person who's pregnant. And so our ability to flip this court means that we can reverse this, protect voting rights, as well as revisit redistricting and have Wisconsin be less of a gerrymandered state. Then it's about creating that culture of voting, right? If we get people to vote in the spring, we're going to get them to vote in the fall. And we're going to get them to vote in midterms and in presidentials, right? And in all those small special elections that we'll have throughout the year. And so this culture of voting really is, kind of establishing the long-term pattern of how we win election after election in Wisconsin. And finally, we do have a smaller race that I'll mention, but I'm not going to focus on. This is a state Senate race, which allows us to flip the Senate from a Republican supermajority to just a Republican majority. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that after this. So we just had a primary, and Jim is right. Janet Prostasiewicz did amazing. She actually got more votes than the 2 conservative candidates by over 3,000 votes. And the progressives overall actually got more votes than by 75,000 votes than the 2 conservatives. So that's good news for us coming out of the primary. We know that we did a lot of work and that to make that possible. And also, we know that turnout was just kind of at an historic level. We've never seen this type of turnout before in a primary for April. So what we know is that turnout is likely going to be very high. And so I'll talk more about that at the next slide. And the progressive advantage in the primary, however, doesn't necessarily translate to an advantage in the general election. What I mean by that is that even though we're coming out of this primary by 75,000 votes, more than the conservatives, they have 2 Republican billionaires that are invested in this race, one of which has said that they will invest $20 million to get Daniel Kelly elected. That's a lot of money, in a Supreme Court race. That will make this race the most expensive Supreme Court race in Wisconsin's history. Already, a lot of fundraising has been happening, so we can combat this, but that's what we're up against. The second one is because the primary election was so high in turnout, there's no real understanding of a ceiling of how high it can go. And that creates opportunities on both the conservative side and the progressive side to pick up those votes and pick up those marginal voters, which is what is key here to actually win this election. So that means that we've changed our strategy a little bit. It was more about base turnout before, and now it's getting the base to turn out, of which there's like 1.6 million regular spring voters, and then getting those marginal voters to turn out as well, so we can build up those margins to overcome any kind of conservative surge in the face of this. The good thing is that geographically, progressives are pretty united. So across the board, from the north all the way down the south, east and west, Janet Prostasiewicz or Everett Mitchell, who were the progressives, performed fairly well. And the conservatives do seem to have concentrated areas of power in the Fox Valley, which is our finger part of the state, if you are unfamiliar with our geography, as well as the southeastern part of the state, which is a very densely populated area. So we know where we have to make up space, and we know where we're relatively strong. And so we have to continue to move forward with that strategy. Another one is the fact that Dane County just continues to deliver. It is one of our most progressive areas, and we haven't really hit a ceiling there. So we also plan on focusing to bring out more voters, kind of pull from that seamlessly endless pool of Democratic votes. So this is what I mean by we have no idea what's going to happen. 1.3 million voters, which is our high turnout estimate, which is the low now, would be the most expansive, would be the most turnout that we've ever seen in a Supreme Court election that wasn't a presidential preference primary at the same time. The higher turnout would be basically in line with a presidential preference primary and a Supreme Court election, which would still be the historic kind of election that we've seen in Wisconsin. If we go above 1.5 million, this is what we call the chaos zone, where both the conservatives and the progressives are sort of kind of unknown in that sense. And so we really have to kind of build out those margins. And so it's possible that we get there. And that again means that it just emphasizes once again that every single vote really does matter in this race. But if we end up in the higher turnout scenario, which I think is probably very likely, that means that as progressives, we just have a gap of about 76,000 voters to win this race. There's a lot of words on this slide, so people can feel free to read it or not. But the main thing I want to highlight is just that there's a really important role that the independent expenditure plays within the ecosystem of Wisconsin. We have a phenomenally strong party that does some great and amazing things under the leadership of Ben Wickler. We also have a great communications infrastructure and a research infrastructure. And so what the independent expenditure does is that we really are actually specialized in picking up those marginal voters and picking up folks in areas that normally don't see a lot of Democratic turnout. So the rural areas of Wisconsin where we're talking as validators are those suburban areas of Wisconsin where maybe there's more college students that need to be mobilized, or Black and brown voters that need to be mobilized. That's really where we see ourselves excelling in this space compared to where the party or others may be. So we do have a strategy of how we're going to win. And again, there's a lot of, words on this slide, but I want to really point you to a couple things. The first one is that we're going to only knock doors in a paid sense in 9 counties, but we're going to focus on volunteer doors outside of those 9 counties. We also think women are a key part of their persuasion because of the fact that abortion is such a mobilizing issue here. And we also again know that we have to expand the electorate because of the marginal votes. And another thing is we need to find the issue environment. What do I mean by that? As Jim said, Janet came out really strong. We have to come out really strong in the issues that our voters care about so we can move this forward. So I want to just highlight again some of our partners, Grow and Progress North. I know you probably heard a lot about them and will hear a lot about them, but they are truly folks who are where no one else in our coalition is. And they're going to focus a lot on talking to people, meeting them where they're out and getting them out to vote in these key geographies where we're going to be frankly losing forward and building up that kind of 3 vote by municipality margin that will help us win in this Supreme Court election. So I'm gonna pause there and I think I'll turn it back to Jim.
Okay, so now we have questions, and Aaron he monitors the question. I noticed that as it happens, our colleague Lou Freeland has been answering the questions in the chat, which is fine. But if anybody wants to expand those questions and ask additional questions, let's hear about it.
And for those who haven't been following in the chat, the 2 questions so far: is there current reliable polling on the race? Too soon since the primary? And Lou was saying that Marquette is the gold standard and there are no reliable polls as of yet. I think it's always good to be aware of like junk Republican polls that try to skew the perception of the race to dampen Democratic enthusiasm. And then another question is it useful to publicize heavily how those Republican mega donors are trying to buy the election? Do voters resent this and respond to it? And Lou says, we are aware, yes, they do respond to it. Jasmine, do you want to talk a little bit about that whole idea of the Republican mega donors trying to buy the election? Is that one of the ways that you motivate the sort of high potential, low turnout voters?
Yeah, so something that we built up in 2019 after we lost the Supreme Court election was this like a research consortium, which the party buys into, independent expenditure groups buy into, as well as candidates. So Janet is actually part of that now. And so we've actually conducted about 3 different polls pre-primary to help us know like who was the biggest threat of the conservatives, which is why you might have seen, if you were in Wisconsin, a lot of like ads against Jennifer DeRoe, because we figured she'd be super hard to beat in the general. And because of the hard work of folks there, we actually got Daniel Kelly. Not that he's easy, we got the one we wanted though, which is great. So we actually have about Marquette poll is definitely the golden standard, but we have a schedule of polling that we're going to conduct. The first one coming out March 1st to be able to say what the actual environment is now that there's been a little bit of time. So we're definitely kind of looking, into that and making sure that we're trying to message on what's effective based on the research that we're doing internally. Now, we have tested the Republican kind of like buying the election message in focus groups, and we're testing it again in focus groups this week to see where it kind of falls. As of right now, it's not like the biggest motivating thing for progressives. What motivates them is getting abortion back, as well as flipping the court. And then some are motivated by fairer maps, but we want to test it because we feel like maybe we didn't say it correctly, or maybe the words that we use didn't really click with the reality on the ground. So because we do think that there's a real opportunity here with voters to get them mobilized around that, or at least get those super progressive voters who don't vote in Supreme Court elections to care and come out because of this issue. So we're going to test it out again and the polls, as well as doing some digital ads and seeing how people respond.
And another question just came in. What are Dan Kelly's weaknesses and how is he being attacked?
Yeah, he has a lot, thankfully. We beat him in 2020 during the pandemic. If folks remember that 2020 race. But what we're harping on right now is, one, his support for the 1849 abortion ban. And his endorsements by very extreme groups. We are framing him as an extremist, and that, I think it bears out in the ways that he has conducted his work. We're attacking him on the fact that while he was a consultant, after getting kicked out the Supreme Court, he actually consulted predominantly for Republicans, sort of highlighting his partisanship there. So that's a weakness that we saw so far. And he has a number of cases where he defended some pretty bad folks, those who had abused children and got them off with little to no time. And so that's a very powerful message that we're also putting out there. Our goal here is to frame him as a person who is out of touch with folks and doesn't care about us, and frame Janet Prostasiewicz as a person who's a common sense judge who cares about us. And that's really kind of like what the framing is, and how we're hoping to get the message across to folks.
And a question just came in, and there's another one further up the chat, but to what extent did the Democratic presidential primary affect the margin of Kelly's loss?
That is a good question. I'd have to kind of look back there to see. But we actually, in 2020, when he lost the first time, we won that race by about 10 points. And it was a pretty unique moment, though, because about 70+% of the votes were cast by mail for the first time in Wisconsin's history. Before that, it was 4 to 6%. And then people were very upset that the Supreme Court forced the election to happen, even though we were in the middle of a pandemic. And Kelly was also the deciding vote there, even though it was his election to get reelected. And so people also came out against him too. So at that point in Wisconsin, there wasn't, I would say, like the competitiveness of the presidential, if I recall correctly, wasn't that strong. It was sort of clear at the point that Biden was probably going to be the nominee. So, you know, we haven't really, I can't say exactly how much of that impacted that one, but I think probably other factors contributed a lot more to that at the time.
Great. Okay, I think we have time for one more. The question is, how do GROW and Progress North volunteers coordinate efforts with neighbor to neighbor? We helped to support neighbor to neighbor several years ago, and we're curious if there's any synergy there.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the work that they do, especially Progress North, they will go to diners and stuff like that up north in Wisconsin, something that, because there's only so many doors to knock in a drivable area. And so they'll go to the local Denny's, or they'll go to the local, shop, and they will talk to people and get them excited about the election, talk to them about why this matters specifically to northern Wisconsinites. And then they will get them to go in kind of what we call vote triple or neighbor, talking, relational organizing, and get them to talk to their friends and family to get them out to vote. Then they'll layer that on with mailers and phone calls to follow up and make sure that people are actually kind of still engaging in the process. And so that's kind of how I understand that both of those groups work in a frankly more conservative area to get the kind of progressives out of the mix and feel frankly less alone in their progressiveness in areas where they might see a lot of red yard signs, in their neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's always key. Our progressive voters who feel like they're on islands, and it's no, you have neighbors who agree with you. So that's great. Okay, I think Jim, Lisa, do we have time for one more, or should we move?
But thank you so much, Jasmine. That was incredibly informative. There are many, many comments in the chat just thanking you for your information and for all the work that you're doing. And we really appreciate your coming to speak with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really always happy to talk about Wisconsin, and thank you for all of the support into Wisconsin, and then just frankly uplifting us as a key race for this year. So thank you so much for everything that you do.
Thanks. Good luck.
Thank you, Lisa, too.
And now Mary, Mary Pence.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Pence, and you have gotten a lot of information which appeals to your brain. And now I would like, if I can, to appeal a bit to your heart. So each of us here today share one thing in common, and that is a commitment to save our democracy, whatever it takes and however long it takes. So the question for each of us is, what is the best way to use our financial resources in February of 2023? So I believe that it is to support Grow and Progress North, two capable, well-positioned groups. Let me just see if I can get to my next slide, which I am not doing for some reason.
There you go.
There it is. You know, these two groups are capable, they're well-positioned. They will continue to be in place for the long haul, 2024 and beyond, turning out blue voters in key areas to complement the huge amounts of money that will go into rural areas. And I know that you already know that in a statewide race, a blue vote in, say, Red Cliff, way in the north, is worth just as much as a blue vote in Madison. So as you're thinking about the importance of Wisconsin increases, and I hope it's increased a lot during this past hour, I am hopeful that your willingness to increase the amount of your financial contribution will also go up. So each of us have different circumstances and different demands on our resources, but my request is that you start from whatever you had thought about contributing when you joined this meeting, and then to please stretch from that point to a higher point. So for my husband, Dan, and myself, we're both retired, but we are contributing $3,000 so far, and I know we'll be contributing more to position Wisconsin to go Democratic in 2024. So would you please join us in contributing generously as you can, to these two very impressive grassroots groups? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everybody who's been donating. I see that our numbers are going up as we're meeting, so that's wonderful. I'm going to turn it over to Aaron just for a second to talk about membership.
Great. Hi, everybody. As you know, I am the membership chair, and we are planning to gear back up, not only for 2023, but also to hopefully keep gearing up for 2024. So we have a membership team, and Adele Dari from our leadership committee has joined the team as well, and she's going to help me to spearhead our efforts. And we're planning to do a meeting this March to kind of get reinvigorated and think about our expanding our efforts and doing new initiatives to keep reaching new members. And so this is a great way to get involved. If you've wanted to get involved but haven't quite found your niche, we'd love to have your input. So I'm just going to put my email in the chat if you're interested in being on our list, or maybe you used to be a volunteer for membership and you kind of step back for a little bit and you want to get back on board. Just let me know, and I'll be sending out an announcement of our very first meeting for 2023 very soon. Thanks.
Thank you. And Roberta.
Yes, hi. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you. What a great presentation. I just want to...
Roberta, we can't see you. I don't know if you know that.
I did not know that. Sorry. Let me see if I can fix that.
Yes, there you are.
Oh, okay. All right. So I am just going to say a little bit about our letter writing program to help in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. We're coordinating with Working America, which 31st Street has done in the past with Pennsylvania and Georgia. And Working America, for those who don't know, is an affiliate of the AFL-CIO, but what the affiliate does is it reaches out to non-unionized voters non-college educated, non-unionized voters to reach out and touch them in different ways, to let them know about the issues that really matter to them in a very truthful way. And they have a proven track record of really getting these voters to the polls and to the polls to vote for Democrats. So they have a multi-pronged approach where they use texting and canvassing and digital ads, where they actually might mention candidates, etc. But one of the things they also do that's very important is they write letters. And Working America has asked 31st Street to write letters for this Wisconsin Supreme Court race on 2 new subjects that they're really trying out for the first time with particular demographics. And the 2 subjects are reproductive rights, which are very important to most of us and many Democrats, and also election integrity. They've done a lot of research, and they believe that these 2 subjects will resonate with their targeted voters and will get them to the polls to vote for progressive Democrats. But frankly, because they trust us, they trust 31st Street and the members, they really believe we'll do a good job on these sort of novel letters and sort of help them really do their research, test their research. We've been asked to write a total of 3,000 letters before the April 4th election. So in general, the letters would be, we would write them, we would get they would give you addresses, names and addresses of who to send the letters to. And that would be right around March 1st. And then you would write the letters and just mail them progressively. They would all need to be mailed between March 1st and March 31st. So it's a short turnaround time. So we're asking folks to sign up. We have a good number of people signed up. It'd be wonderful if we could get, any more of you would be really helpful, because the more people we have, the fewer letters each one of us has to write. And we really, really want to get to that 3,000 number to help Working America. So I know Lisa had something in her newsletter, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Roberta McInerney, or John Medallia, or Myra Jacobs. You should have, our emails should be available in some of Lisa's newsletters, but should I put them in the chat or anything? Would that be helpful? Okay. I hope I didn't leave anything out. If anybody has any questions, let me know. Thanks.
Roberta, thank you for tuning in from wherever you are. Looks like you're on the road.
I am. Thanks. You're welcome.
Well, thanks everybody who has come. Thank you again to Jasmine Nears. She's still with us, which is amazing. Thank you for giving us your time.
And Lisa, can I just say one quick thing?
Yes.
Because it might be confusing for people. So a member just wrote to me and said, when I clicked on the Act Blue link, it goes to a site for a couple of Minnesota groups. Everybody should know that even though it says that, it is going to the Wisconsin groups. I forget our explanation for why, but it does look that way. So just FYI to everybody.
Yeah, I'll weigh in just to say when groups are new, it's very common in the nonprofit world that they start out with a sponsor. That's kind of like an umbrella or an incubator. And these 2 groups are still in that stage. Hopefully they'll be getting their own IRS status relatively soon. But there is a little note to that on the Act Blue page as well. So Lisa, are we going to keep it open if people want, after we close, if people want to stay on and ask additional questions? Is that?
Yeah, we're just going to wind up, and anybody who would like to drop off can, and then anybody who would like to stay on for a few minutes just to chat, ask any other questions, feel free to do that. We are going to be planning a few in-person events this spring when the weather turns warm. We have decided it's really good for morale for us to be able to see one another in person. So you can expect to see information in the newsletters about probably a social event in late April or May. And then we're also hoping to do one of our monthly meetings, our Sunday monthly meetings in person with a Zoom option.